this sermon, this message that Jesus gives to this crowd of people called the Sermon on the Mount. And what Jesus reveals through this conversation to this crowd of people, that a part of why he came to earth is to bring heaven with him. That the kingdom of heaven, the place where God's perfect will is being done all the time, Jesus seeks to bring that kingdom here on earth in more and more ways. That is what Jesus is talking about through the Sermon on the Mount, this kingdom of his that he's bringing to earth. What's remarkable about that kingdom is Jesus is looking at this crowd of people and he is inviting them in. He's saying, there's a place for you in my kingdom. There's a seat for you. Come be a part of this kingdom. And not only that, not only are we invited into the kingdom, what Jesus then tells the crowd is that you group of people, as you step into my kingdom, I'm going to form you into a community. And the purpose of that community and a community like ours is we are meant to be people that bring more and more of that kingdom here into our city. Person by person, piece by piece, opportunity by opportunity. That is the invitation from Jesus. Come into my kingdom and be a part of bringing more of that onto this earth. That's what we spent the last 5 weeks talking about. And the beautiful thing that Jesus is talking about in his kingdom is he is telling us this kingdom looks very different from the kingdom of the world. So Jesus spends time talking about what is distinct about his kingdom. What is so different about Jesus' kingdom? Why does it look different than the rest of the world? What does he value versus what does the world tells us matters and values? And what Jesus tells us is that his kingdom, this invitation to step into it, this is the life of fullness. This is the life of flourishing. This is the place through his kingdom where we're going to find satisfaction and significance and joy and peace and hope and love. And we will be people of mercy and compassion. That's what's a part of his kingdom. That's the invitation for us to live life and life to the full. And he contrasts that with the world, saying what the world is telling us is that is the pathway towards joy and happiness. And yet what Jesus tells us and what many of us know and have experienced is that's the pathway that ultimately leaves us empty. That is not the pathway in place that brings us hope and significance and satisfaction. That is a pathway that leaves us always wanting more and more and more, and we can never be filled. And so Jesus is inviting us into his kingdom, saying this is the place that brings us life. This is what he's wanting us to step into. And so he begins articulating, this is what my kingdom looks like. These are the things that my kingdom values. This is what's most important to me. And last week we looked at this section where Jesus begins warning us of what happens when we become so fixated with the things of this world. And he talks about this reality that when we become so consumed by the things of this world, we start valuing the things of this world. And one of the things that the world tells us matters the most is that we are people of influence. That people see us a certain way, that we have enough influence, we have enough followers, that our entire purpose of life is to be known by people and get credit and get all this affirmation from all those other people. And Jesus says it's so easy to fall into the trap, to become fixated and motivated in our lives for the approval of others. And he talks about this idea of generosity, this idea of giving. And giving was meant to be this beautiful relationship with God, that we are so deeply connected to God. We're in such great relationship with God that we are people that recognize how richly we have been blessed. That does not mean life is easy or perfect, yet we still recognize that we have been so richly blessed. And so the natural overflow of our life, if that's what we understand, is we seek to be a blessing towards others. So therefore, generosity, in every sense of that word, is just the natural overflow of our life. That's what giving and generosity was meant to be. That's how it's connected to the kingdom. It is the overflow of our recognition of what Jesus has done. And yet Jesus says we can so easily take that idea and instead of being connected to God, we can use it as a means to get affirmation and attention from the world. That this beautiful thing that was meant to be connected to his kingdom instead becomes this act. And our motivation for being generous or doing things is so others see us and others give us credit and others think that we're these good people or these perfect people. Wow, look how religious that person is. They're so generous. And what Jesus tells us is if that is our motivation, if that's what we're looking for, if that's why we're doing things, then he says this phrase, he says, okay, then your reward is going to be in full. If you're doing this to get credit from others, if you're doing this for likes, if you're doing this for all those things, then that's what you're going to get. And yet ultimately that's going to leave you empty. Because there'll be never enough affirmations in our life. There'll be never enough things that fill that part of who we are for us to ever be satisfied. We'll always be looking for more and more and more. Jesus says, if that's what you're motivated by, okay, that's your reward. But that has nothing to do with my kingdom. That has nothing to do with me. And in my eyes, that's an empty act. So Jesus gives us this warning. What can happen when we turn our eyes towards the things of this world and we become motivated by that? It's going to lead us towards emptiness ultimately. And yet instead, if we're motivated by the overflow of recognizing who God is in our life, then what Jesus tells us, even if no one sees it, even if no one noticed that you helped that old lady cross the street and load groceries in her bag, even if no one else saw you do that, God sees you. And when you live in that way, you will be satisfied. And you would recognize that you are doing things out of the overflow. You don't need attention from others because the God of the universe says, I see you and I see what you've done. And this week, as we continue the conversation, we're going to pick right up right after that section. Remember, this is one message from Jesus. We're breaking it up over 7 weeks. This is one message, one conversation, one sermon from Jesus. And he's going to go from that section talking about do not be fixated for the praise of others. And now he's going to press in deeper. And this morning what Jesus is going to do is he's going to give us the opportunity to really examine our own lives. Because what Jesus is going to press us on is, okay, so where is your kingdom truly? What is it that you truly value? What is it you truly treasure? Is it the things of my kingdom? Or is it actually the things of this earth? Where is that distinction for us? Because it's so easy to try to walk and live in both ways. And what Jesus is saying is that's not possible. And it's easy for us to be people that say, yeah, we value the things of the kingdom. That all sounds great. We want to be people of compassion and generosity and be a blessing. Who doesn't want that? But Jesus says, if we look underneath ourselves, if we examine ourselves, what's truly motivating us? So in my life, I could say that my health really matters and I want to be somebody that works out and I really want to watch what I eat. I'm really focused on my health. I value my health. I can say that. But if you examine my DoorDash orders of this last week, you're going to be like, wow, there's a lot of donuts and pizza and Chick-fil-A you ordered. It was a rough week, guys. I was sick early this week. I wish I was making all of this up. That is what was on my DoorDash this week. So I could say I value this, and yet an examination, if I dig a little deeper, might say, do you? Because look at the decisions you are making. So that's the opportunity for us today, this opportunity to examine our lives, to either step fully into the kingdom Jesus is calling us towards, recognizing there's always going to be this tension with what the world is telling us matters the most. That's the reality. Our whole lives will be lived in this tension. And Jesus is encouraging us, moment by moment, step by step, through each part of our life, examine, examine, examine. And where are we leaning too much towards the things of this world? Good? So if you have a Bible and want to follow along, we're going to be Matthew chapter 6. I believe it's verse 19 is the one we're starting with. Yes. And so Jesus begins this conversation. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And we get to this idea of treasure, and we can begin to think, oh, treasure, that means a ton of wealth. These are people that have private jets. This is a conversation for other people. I don't even have a mortgage. I just rent. This is not about me. And yet, remember the crowd of people Jesus is talking to. That a part of this crowd, and we looked at this at the end of Matthew chapter 4, a part of this crowd are those that Jesus called to come and follow him, his disciples. And these people left their entire lives behind to go and follow Jesus. They literally dropped their fishing nets because Jesus called, come follow me, come sit at my feet, come learn from me, come be a part of changing the world. And so they left their lives behind to go do that. They didn't take a sabbatical. They didn't cash in their PTO. They didn't say, look, I'll be back and I have this savings account. They left their lives behind. They didn't have a bank account that they were going with. They were going from town to town, village to village. Jesus warned them, we're not going to know where we sleep every night. And yet Jesus is telling that crowd, watch out for your treasure. And what's the rest of that crowd? Well, at the end of Matthew chapter 4, we see that people from all of the villages had heard about Jesus, and the multitudes came to get healed. People that were suffering all kinds of diseases, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, from all over the villages came with this desperate hope that Jesus might be who he says he is. And they come to Jesus, and Jesus heals them. But the reality, especially in this time, is that if you were suffering from disease, if you were ailed physically or mentally or spiritually or emotionally, you were sent away from the city. You were sent out of your home. You were not allowed to be in the city center where all of life and community were happening. Why? Because a lot of people thought you did something to deserve that. That if you were sick and you were struggling, well, God is punishing you. That was the mentality. That was the mindset. You did something to deserve the condition you're in. And not only that, people thought that that could be transferred. Like, don't come anywhere near me because I don't want to catch whatever it is that you have. So these people were shunned to the edges of the city, meaning they were living as beggars, desperate for a meal. These people did not have jobs or livelihoods. And so Jesus starts talking to this crowd of people that have very little to nothing and starts talking about this idea of treasure. Why? Because the reality for us is, it doesn't matter how much or how little we have. The question Jesus is saying is, how much value are we ascribing to the things that we're holding on to? Because we can be people that have very little, but we are so fixated on the little we have. We're consumed by the little we have. All we think about is the little we have. All we think about is trying to get more of the little we have, that our focus is totally stuck on that treasure. And yet we can be people that have a lot, that have been blessed richly, and yet we're not focused on that. We're not consumed by that. We're not driven by that. And we can live open-handedly, right? It's not about the amount. It's about what value are you ascribing to the things that you have, no matter how little or how much. That is a conversation about treasure. And Jesus starts contrasting. There's two different ways to view the things that you have. And are you viewing them as the treasures here on earth, or are you viewing your treasures as things of the kingdom? Where is your value system, earth or the kingdom? Because if you value the things of the kingdom, what Jesus means by that is that means you value the things that God values. You care about the things that God cares about. We've talked about those things. I'm a broken record. That means we care about being people that bring more of heaven here on earth. We care about people that bring love and care and compassion. We seek to be a blessing to the world around us. Those are the values of the kingdom. And what Jesus is saying, no one can mess with those things. If that's your value system, if that's what matters most to you, no one can mess with that. But if we value the things of this earth, well, those things can be messed with. He's talking about this idea of moths and vermin. Remember, this is a farming culture. They had crops, they had fields, and so they knew that rodents can come through and destroy their crops. It could massively impact their livelihood. Weather can destroy their crops. Moths and vermin can destroy those things. If that's where the treasure is, in our finance, in our fields, in the things we have, what Jesus is saying, moths and vermin can destroy those things. If you're holding on to your possessions, guess what? Your possessions can be messed with. Why? Thieves can steal it. What Jesus is saying, if our treasure, if our security, if what we are driving towards are the possessions of this earth, you know it, I know it, those things go up and down, they ebb and flow. Our bank accounts go up and down. Our jobs go up and down. We have them one day, they're gone the other day. Those things can be messed with by others. And one of the things that can expose in our heart, are we valuing the things of the kingdom or are we valuing the things of the earth, is what is your response? What is your response when those things are messed with? Because they're going to be messed with. And it doesn't mean that we don't react. If our bank account is wiped out tomorrow, we don't smile and say, oh, well, no, that's a real thing. There's real pain in that. That's going to cause some stress. That's going to impact our lives. That is a normal response, right? There's a normal reaction to that. But there are things in our life at times that we have a disproportionate response to. And when we have a disproportionate response, that is an area in our life that we must examine and say, is there something that I'm so deeply putting my security in that when that was messed with a little bit, I reacted so deeply towards it? Let me give you an example. In my life, I had no understanding that one of the things I so deeply was valuing was my position at my old church. I had no idea that a part of the thing I was holding onto so deeply was my position and my authority and my role at my old church. I wasn't the main person, I was underneath the main person. And there was a season of time where I was involved in every single decision being made at our church. I was part of every conversation. I was in the room for every single thing happening, whether it involved staff, whether it involved Sunday mornings, programming, or finance, our facility, anything happening at church, I was in the room. And honestly, deep down, if I was honest, I kind of deserve to be. I mean, that's what I thought. I deserve to be in these rooms. I'm wise. I'm by far the longest tenured person here. I should be in every room. I should be doing those things, which should have been warning sign number one that I may be overemphasizing this. But I didn't realize that was an issue until that got messed with. And suddenly meetings started happening that I wasn't a part of, and decisions started getting made that I wasn't involved with, and direction of the church started moving and shifting, but I wasn't a part of that conversation. So a normal response would have been, well, that's frustrating. That's hard. That hurts. Why is my voice not valued? That would have been a normal response. A normal response would have been to go to my boss and say, hey, help me understand this. Let me get some clarity. Help me understand why I'm no longer in those rooms. And from that conversation, either I would have had much more clarity about, okay, I know my job, I know what I'm supposed to do, let me charge out. Or, you know what? I don't think that's aligned with where God is calling me, so maybe it's time for me to step away. That's a normal response to that. I did not do any of those things. I grew frustrated, I got angry, I got bitter, I got really emotional and depressed about it. It had such a deep impact on me just by not being invited to a meeting or two. I started becoming angry and bitter at those that were in the room because they don't deserve to be in the room. They've only been here 2 years. How come they're in that conversation? Whoa. That began to reveal there is something going on there, man. And what's sad is that didn't last weeks or months for me. It was well over a year that I lived with that anger and bitterness. It consumed me. It affected my house. I didn't just leave it at the door. I would come home and be in a funk. I remember Michelle saying, I just thought that's who you became, that you were just this bitter and kind of angry and frustrated person. That is a disproportionate response to what was going on, right? I mean, we can look at it rationally now okay, figure it out. If that's not working for you, go somewhere else, but not me. I held on to it so tightly and had such bitterness and anger. I had the attitude of all right, go do it your way. And when it fails, because it will, because you don't know what to do, don't come crying to me. What kind of attitude is that in a church? See, our reaction when these things get messed with, do we have a normal response or do we have a disproportionate response? And that may reveal to us, oh man, is there something going on there that I need to examine in my life? Where is our treasure? On earth, where things can be destroyed? Or is our treasure really in the kingdom things? Verse 22, Jesus starts talking about another thing that can help reveal where a kingdom is how we view the world. And Jesus gives us two different ways that we can view the world. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If our eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, well, your whole body will be full of darkness. If the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Jesus is saying there's two different ways we can view this world. One pastor and author, I loved how he framed it because it really helps me understand it. He says, we are people, and how we operate, how we view the world is either we are people that view the world with abundance or we're people that view the world with scarcity. That's the line for us. That we operate, how we view the world, how we view others is through eyes of abundance or it's through eyes of scarcity. And here's the difference. If we view the world through eyes of abundance, we believe that there is enough in this world. We believe that God has blessed us, and so it is the calling of our life to be a blessing towards others. We seek to help, bring compassion and care to the world around us. We're open-handed with our generosity. We're open-handed with our compassion and mercy. We're open-handed being people who forgive easily. When we see the world through those eyes, when we see people hurting, we seek to move towards them and respond and help. When we see people hungry, we seek to move towards them and help and respond. That means we carry eyes of abundance. We walk open-handed. We walk recognizing that God has blessed us. Does it mean our lives are perfect and easy? No. But yet we still, through the hard, walk with abundance. Or we view the lens of scarcity. And scarcity says there's not enough in this world. Scarcity said there's only so many pieces of the pie, so I've got to get as many pieces as I can because there's only so much and there's not enough in this world. Scarcity says there's only so many VP positions at my job, so I need to be one of those VPs, so I need to find my way up that ladder and crawl around people and throw people under the bus and do whatever unethical thing I can because that needs to be my role. I need to get that job title. Scarcity says there's only so much money, so I need to grab and hold on to and hoard everything I got. If I see someone hurting, you know what? I might help a little bit, but you probably deserve what you're doing and you made some poor decisions, so I'm not really too concerned about you. I've got to protect me and my family. This is all about me. So now it's me versus you, us versus them. When we begin viewing the world through that mindset, when it is us versus them, when there's only so much I need to hold on to everything I've got and hold on to it tightly, what Jesus is saying is that we're viewing the world in darkness. We're viewing the world through this lens of scarcity, that there's not enough. So we need to claw and we need to do whatever it takes. And we carry this mindset in our lives that the ends justify the means. And what Jesus is saying, that in my kingdom, that cannot be further from the truth. That is a difference. One of the things that might reveal where our treasure lies, what kingdom are we leaning towards, what do we truly value, is how do you see the world and how do you see people around you? Do you walk with abundance in your life or do we walk with scarcity? I'll say again, this isn't easy. We're not meant to solve this all with one fell swoop. This is a lifelong journey for us, but we're meant to examine piece by piece, each part of our life. God, where am I leaning towards scarcity? Where do I not feel like there's enough? What is preventing me from being more open-handed with these things? And let God reveal to us where we need to reset our eyes. So the first thing that helps us examine our treasures is what is our response when the things of this earth are messed with. The second thing is, how do we view the world through abundance or scarcity? And the last thing we're going to talk about is this idea of worry. Oh, before that, one more part before that. Welcome to a rainy morning. Before we get to the idea of worry, stay tuned. Jesus, we should be worried. Jesus says this phrase that is so important for us to lock in on. Or I would have skipped it. Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. So he's talking about our eyes. He's talking about the lens, how we view people. Jesus says, we cannot serve two masters. We cannot operate in two kingdoms. He says, either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So this is always the verse that people look at, and it's like, oh, this is a verse about how money is evil and money is bad, and if you have money, you're a bad person. That is not at all what Jesus is talking about. What Jesus is talking about is, where does allegiance lie? Because money is neutral. Money is neither good nor evil, though it can be used for both good and evil. Money can be used to change lives. Money can be used to change lives and families and cities. That people's generosity has changed people completely, right? Money can be this beautiful weapon to use for good. Money can also be a source of evil. Money can be this weapon used for wrong. Not only in how it can consume us, that if we are driven and the only thing we care about is how much we can make, I need to make as much as I can, and I've only got so much time, I need to earn, and I'll give a little bit to the church, I'll give a little bit here and there. Jesus is saying, if our focus, if our fixation is on money, that's a problem. And not only can money be evil because of our devotion to it, money can be evil in the ways that it's used for power. Right? Those with money using it as power over people. If you've ever had a boss that's dangled promotions or raises over you, know what I'm talking about, using money as a means to manipulate you. Money is neutral. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. The question is, what is our view of that? And Jesus said, you can't both serve God. You cannot serve my kingdom and the kingdom of wealth. And the word he's using there, money, isn't money. It's this word called mammon. And mammon is this word that's translated towards excess or greed. That's the word. We cannot serve both God and the gods of excess and greed. In fact, many scholars think that what Jesus was referring to was literally the god Mammon, which was the god of greed and excess that people would go and bow down to and pray to. Many scholars are like, no, Jesus is literally talking about people praying to that god and saying, you cannot pray to the god of excess and greed and say you're also part of my kingdom. Because guess what? My kingdom is defined by sacrifice and generosity. You cannot walk in both places. How are you viewing the world? And then Jesus talks about worry. And worry is this interesting topic in the Bible. In the New Testament alone, the word worry and anxiety is mentioned, I think, 19 times, based on some good Googling. I didn't look through it. And if you add the idea of fear, worry, and anxiety between the Old Testament and New Testament, there's over 350 references towards fear, worry, and anxiety. Why? Because God knows there's going to be things that cause us worry and anxiety. God knows that's going to be a real part of our lives. Why? There's a lot to worry about in this world. This world is broken. That there is pain in this world. There is suffering in this world. There is death in this world. There is injustice in this world. There is evil in this world. There are people in this world that wish to do you harm for whatever reason. So if you didn't walk in worrying, well, now you're worrying. There's good news coming. But the reason God talks about it again and again and again is he knows this is going to be a lifelong struggle, that we're going to live in this tension of worry. And yet we can look at a verse like that and be like, oh, if I worry, that means I'm sinning. That means God's mad at me. That means I'm not doing right. And now I'm worried about my worry. And I'm worried about the worry of my worry. And now I'm spinning out. And that is not what God is talking about. God is not saying that. God recognizes there's going to be worry in our life. But what God is saying to us, and what we're going to unpack here in a moment, is we are not meant to be people who are consumed by our worry. Yes, we're going to worry. Yes, there's going to be hard seasons. Yes, there's going to be things that bring us fear and anxiety. Yes, yes, yes. But Jesus is saying we're not meant to be people consumed by it. Why? Because if we are focused on God's kingdom, what Jesus is inviting us to is that we live a life through him, and that life is going to be the life of fullness. Does it mean it's immune from suffering and pain? Nope. There will be suffering and pain. But yet what God promises us is here on earth, that he is a God that sees us and knows us. He's a God that provides for us. He's a God that knows our prayers before we even say them. That's what God is promising. Doesn't mean our lives are going to be easy. But not only that, the promise of Jesus isn't just for our life here on earth. It is a promise of eternity. That when we step into God's kingdom, Jesus says, I'm here for you now on this earth, but your eternity is secure with me as well. And when we die, because we all will, more good news on a Sunday morning, when we die, Jesus is going to bring us fully into his kingdom, a place with no suffering, no pain, no fear, no injustice. That's the promise. And so when we talk about this idea of worry, yes, there are things that are going to worry us, but we are not consumed because we trust in Jesus. And the second thing that Jesus is going to unpack in this section is, yes, there are real things that will cause us worry. But if we examine our lives, what Jesus is saying, that there are things that you are worried about. There's things that keep you up at night. There's things that stress you out. And there's a bunch of those things that are because your treasures are on things of this world. It's not all of your worry. But absolutely, if we look at our lives, there are things that keep us up at night, that stress us out, that even when we go on vacation, we can't stop thinking about it. There are things like that in our life, and it's because our treasure and our security and our focus is on the things of this earth. Jesus is saying, examine those things. Examine your worry. What is underneath it, and how much of that is because you are holding on to the things of this world versus the things of this kingdom. Because the macro of this conversation we're about to get into is Jesus is saying, where is your faith and trust? If you want to step in my kingdom, what you are saying, God, I trust you, and my faith is in you. And again, it doesn't mean life is easy, but ultimately I carry a hope in my heart because I believe in you, God. Jesus is saying, where is your faith and where is your trust? Because if you're consumed by worry, what you are saying is truly, you don't really trust me. Or you don't really believe that I'm good. Does that make sense? So as we get into this conversation, Jesus is going to use these kind of two metaphors. He's going to talk about two things of creation, birds and flowers. I will try to unpack it a little bit. It might seem a little confusing, but keep in mind, what is Jesus trying to talk about? Where is our faith? Where is our trust? Do we believe that God is good? Is our faith and trust in that, or is it on things of this world? And is our worry connected to the things of earth which can be destroyed and messed with, or are we connected to the things of God? Good? That was a good 10-minute introduction to like 6 verses. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? Jesus is highlighting some of the natural things we worry about, our bodies, our health, our lives, the things we're going to eat, our immediate needs, the material needs we have, our clothes. Jesus is encompassing all of it, saying, hey, do not be stressed out about those things. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they are? Meaning birds don't wake up thinking, where am I going to eat today, and how much food do I have, and do I have enough coupons to cut, and do I have enough food for tomorrow or the next day? They're birds. They're not thinking about that. They're going about their bird business, and they're getting fed, and they're eating. Does every bird have food? Maybe, maybe not. But Jesus is saying, look, the birds are living carefree because they're not being consumed by the worry of those things. They just wake up believing. How much more your Father in heaven that calls you his sons and his daughters is God going to provide? I'll caveat again. Does that mean it's always easy? No. But God is saying, where's your faith and trust? And, verse 27, can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? What is the end point of that worry? What does it result in your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin, meaning they're not making their own clothes. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon, the king, in all of his splendor, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today, and tomorrow will be thrown into the fire, which is so temporary, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? This is a faith conversation. She's saying the birds are living carefree. They're not worried about it. And I provide for them. How much more will I provide for you? And the flowers are not worrying about looking nice and pretty. I provide for them. And they're temporary. How much more your Father in heaven? Is your trust and faith in me, or is it of the things of this world? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run around after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. By pagans, he means people that don't know God. People have either rejected God, have turned their back on God, or people that have not come to understand the love and the care of Jesus. That's what he means by pagan. And he's saying, look at the pagans. They're running around consumed by these things. Why? Because they don't have the promise of eternity. They don't have the promise of God in their life. All they know is this world, and this is all they see. So of course they're walking with scarcity. Of course they're holding on tight to every single thing. This is all there is. Of course they're consumed by worry about what happens in this world and the next, because they don't carry the hope of heaven. Jesus is saying, not so with you. Why do you look very much like that? Your hope is in me. Your hope is in heaven. You know that pain and suffering do not have the final say in your life. That's not the end of your story. The end of your story is eternity with God in perfection. So why are you running around like that's not true of your life? Where is your faith? Don't run around as people without hope. You have hope in your life. And so what should we put the focus on? But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. But I invite the worship band back up as we close. So Jesus is saying, reset your focus, reset your lens, focus on the kingdom, focus on the righteousness, which is everything we've talked about the last 5 weeks, is what does it look like to step into Jesus' kingdom? What does it look like to live a life of flourishing where we are satisfied and we carry hope and peace? Even through the hard, we're meant to be people that still carry hope and peace because we believe and trust in the God of the universe. So Jesus says, orient your eyes on that. Focus on that. Focus on my kingdom. Because no matter how hard it gets, this will be the life and the pathway of freedom for you. That you can let go of those things. Is it easy? No. Does it happen right away? Some of it, but no. This is a lifelong battle for us, week by week, moment by moment, to examine our lives. What are the things that are pulling me towards being fixated on the things of this earth? Every one of us has experienced loss. Every one of us have had the things we care about messed with, right? We know these things don't last. Our health can be here today and gone tomorrow. Our job can be here today and tomorrow we're looking for work. These things are not permanent. It doesn't mean we don't care. But it means do not put our security in the things that we know don't last. Shift our focus and our allegiance. this is an invitation from Jesus to examine ourselves and say, Jesus, I want to desperately put my trust in you. So help me do that, God. Help me be somebody that lives in light of your kingdom. Help me be someone that recognizes that I carry a hope deep in my heart. So even through the hard and even through the struggles, Jesus, I'm going to say I trust you, even when it doesn't make sense to me. That is the invitation for us, that we do not be people that are consumed by the things of this world or consumed by our worry, but we walk in freedom and peace. So with all of that, let us worship together. Let us continue examining, and let's continue moving away from the things of this world and putting our hope and trust in the God of the universe that says, I see you and I know you and I love you. You are my sons and my daughters. So come into my kingdom. Let's worship.